Hi, everyone. I'm Demetria, and this is episode number 12 of the Soul Podcasting Podcast. And today we're going to talk about how to brainstorm those awesome podcast topics. So let's just say that you've recently begun your podcast and you know that there will be many weeks and months ahead where you will need to make sure to fill up your podcast with incredible content. And what if this is stressing you out a little bit, knowing that you have an audience, a growing audience that wants to hear from you on a regular basis, and you have to provide valuable content for them? So how do you make sure that your podcast topics are excellent? They're just right for what you need at the time, and they're just right for what your audience is looking for at the time. I'm going to give you 4 very basic tips to help you move forward in that direction toward making sure that you feel more confident. In my very last episode, I talked about how to launch your podcast without perfection. I want you to get started if you haven't already. But as you're getting started, it's going to help you to feel more confident if you know exactly what you're going to be doing and you're not feeling like you're floundering around with your ideas and what you want to put on the table for your audience. So I want you to feel a sense of confidence. We talked about confidence in episode number 10, how to launch your first podcast with confidence. So I've been asking you to just jump in, right? So if you haven't already, I've been focusing on just teaching the idea of jumping in. Whether you have all your ideas together or not, whether you feel like you have your ideas completely panned out or not, just getting started with your very first episode will take you to the next and the next and the next. If you have passion and if you know that there's something you actually want to deliver to your audience on a frequent basis. So I always ask you to jump in. However, on this episode, we're really going to talk about fleshing out those ideas so that you're more confident in what you're bringing to the table every week. So the very first thing that I believe any podcaster should do when you are thinking about the topics for the upcoming months and year, I like to look at things in terms of quarterly, 6 months, and a year, is to just really start with a very basic foundation of remembering what your mission is. So last time we talked about remember your why. I always talk about remember why you're doing it. So what is your mission? What is it that you actually want to be doing? How do you want your audience to feel? What do you want to be talking about so that your audience feels a certain way? What are you trying to accomplish on this podcast? Every single episode should be supporting that overall goal. So if you want your audience to feel encouraged, then every episode should be encouraging them. There should be an underlying theme of encouragement. If you want your audience to feel entertained, then by the end of every episode, your audience should feel really entertained, whether they're laughing, whether they're amused. What is your goal? Do you want them to feel spiritually fulfilled, or do you want them to feel enlightened? Figure out what that is, because every single show that you do, those topics are going to have to kind of play into your final goal. So you want your topics to be supporting your mission. The second thing is to create pillar content topics for the year that solves any and all problems that your audience is having. Let's break that down to what pillar content topics actually means. And what I mean by that are you're going to have a set of topics that you will be talking about throughout the year. And these are going to be your larger categories. So if you are in the health industry and you are going to be talking about your physical health, you're going to be talking about mental health, maybe emotional health, maybe you'll talk about fitness. Maybe there will be different aspects of health that you will cover on your podcast this year. And then you'll want to take those pillar content topics and break them down into subtopics. And those subtopics are going to be those specific titles of every podcast episode that comes out that year. Those are the subtopics that are going to solve specific problems for your audience. What you're wanting to do is to solve the problems by talking about these things on your podcast, interviewing guests if that's the format you're using, or just sharing your own experiences or finding statistics and information online that can help your audience. Maybe share excerpts from a book that you've written, maybe talk about things that are going to help support your listeners to solving the problem that they're having. The reason they're listening to your podcast is very likely because that's the topic they want. So a lot of times listeners will Google a topic, they will go into Apple Podcasts and find a specific topic that they want because they're applying this information to their life. They're finding anything that can help them solve their problems. So if your podcast episode is the one that they land upon, then you have just helped your listener solve their problem and you've probably gained a new subscriber. So make sure that the topics that you're talking about throughout the year is going to help your listener in a very specific and concrete way. The next thing is just to make sure that you have enough content. And I am almost 100% positive that you won't run out of ideas. And there are specific strategies that I use to curate ideas for my podcast from year to year. And I go into more detail about that in my coaching and in my courses and my workshops, anything that I provide. But in a nutshell, what I ask my client to do, if they're wondering how to create content topics, is to make sure that at least to start, you want to be very strong. You want to have a strong podcast start. So if there are 12 months in a year, so how often do you want a podcast? So you're looking at 2 episodes per month. Let's just throw a number out there. 2 episodes per month is 24 episodes. I do believe with all of my heart that you can find 24 topics for the year. So in a case where you're only publishing an episode, let's say every other week, then you have a really higher chance at being successful with your podcasting your very first year. And you want to have a strong start and a good foundation. So whether that's once a week, which would be 48 episodes, or whether that's twice a month, which is 24 episodes, or whether that's once a month, which is only 12 episodes, you're going to have a strong start because you'll have those 12, 24, or 48 episode titles already in an article bank that you create to give yourself a place for ideas that you're listing on a weekly basis. But what I recommend is just going ahead and finding those 48 topics or 24 topics, however many you're going to be publishing, and go ahead and write those down, type it up into your idea bank, so that when it's time to actually start finding who's going to be on that episode to interview about that content piece or where you're going to find information for that content piece, you'll already have the topic provided. And all you have to do is fill in the missing pieces to create the episode itself. So the idea curation is one of the most basic foundational parts of podcasting, but it is what's going to help you to get a head start and to have a foundation for the year. So I recommend to go ahead and get all of that together. Just go ahead and put it on the radar for the year. If you're planning to publish an episode 2 to 3 times per week, then that significantly increases the amount of topics that you'll have to curate. So in that case, then I recommend just looking at your podcast episodes on a quarterly basis, or maybe by 3 to 6 months, I would say, just to make sure that you have that amount of topics that you're going to be discussing in advance of the publication schedule. So you want to make sure that you feel confident in what you're going to be talking about before you go in and fill in the content. Filling in the content is simply just gathering your interviewees or finding the information that you want to present on your episode. If you have the topic ideas, then you can create your outlines for each show. Each of these are very separate steps. But on this episode, we're only talking about brainstorming your topics, just your topics. So when I started this podcast, I knew that I wanted to initially start with once a week. And at some point, I kind of tapped back to about twice a month or every other week. And we'll see if I want to revamp that to weekly again. I do like the idea of bringing content every single week. So what I did was I made sure that I already had 48 episode ideas ready to go. In fact, I'm looking right now at 51 ideas that I have ready to go to talk to you guys about this year, so that I really don't have an excuse. I can always open this Google Doc that lists all 51 of my episodes, and at any point when I'm ready to start creating outlines for one of those episodes, I already have the topic. I just need to do the research for it and create the outline. And then when it's time for me to record, produce and edit. All I have to do is sit down at my microphone and record this information. So this is my process, and I will probably do another episode on like my exact process that I use for podcasting, or just kind of teach, some of the ideas about how I make things easier for my lifestyle and how you can make it fit for yours as well, because everybody's lifestyle is different. But this is how I'm doing it. And one of my passions on this podcast is to help you figure out how to make it work for you. I know a lot of you are busy. I know a lot of you are working a full-time gig or a part-time gig, and this is a very, very part-time project for you. So you don't have a lot of time to sit down and do a lot of work on your podcast, but you still have that burning desire to bring your message to the table in the form of a podcast. And whether it's to create a brand, to support a mission that you have, something that you know that you're supposed to be doing in life, maybe you're building a business, or maybe you're creating a company podcast. I'm not sure what your goals are, but whatever they are, I want you to be very successful with creating your podcast this year. So I hope that I'm helping you to do that on this show. Next, after you've created those topics for the year, you kind of have an idea of how many episodes you want. You'll just want to map it out. Use your tool of choice. That could be your Google Calendar. It could be Trello, Asana, ClickUp, any project management tool that works for you. You just have to know what is your favorite one and pick the one that works. And so I always like to recommend starting with just Google Calendar to begin with, and plug in those days of the week that you plan to, first of all, record based on the topics that you've selected for the year and the outlines you've created for those topics. So you're going to have a recording day. Secondly, pick a day that you're going to edit that episode for the week, or whether you're going to have someone else do that for you. And thirdly, have a day of the week that your episode is going to be scheduled to be published. Okay. So every day that you want your podcast to be published needs to show up on your calendar somehow. Mark it in red or your favorite color, and make sure that it's front and center. You can see that so that you're aware of your publication schedule. Every time you open your calendar, you know that this is the day, whether it's Wednesday or Thursday, that it's your day that your scheduled episode should be released. That means it already needs to have been edited and it's ready to run. So it's on schedule and it's ready to be published on that day. And that's going to help you stay consistent. So after you brainstorm those podcast topic ideas, this is what you need to do to make sure that you're consistent with publishing. And lastly, just keep on brainstorming. Just keep right on creating ideas, curating ideas. So this is going to look very different for everybody, but it could be that you take one day out of the month to sit down and look in Key Search Planner to see what people are looking for, or to do Google keyword tools, or using some type of search engine optimization tool to help you figure out what people are looking for, what your ideal audience would be searching for, so that you have even more ideas that you could add to your content idea bank. That's going to help you to figure out some things that you might want to talk about later on. So even if you have this year's worth of content already ready to go, you can still continue adding to that list, because you very likely will want to continue podcasting for year number 2 and maybe even year number 3, and on and on and on. So, this is just to kind of keep you motivated so that you don't ever come to a point where you're kind of out of ideas, and you just keep going. It becomes part of your routine. It becomes part of your structure, and the structure of your day, of your weeks. And it's something you look forward to and something that you enjoy doing and bringing to the table. Your topics are helping your audience. And what really, really helps is when you get feedback. So we'll do more episodes on this show about how to get feedback so that you feel motivated to continue thinking of new podcast topic ideas. And that is all I want to share with you on this particular episode. I'm so grateful for you guys. Thank you for listening to me. So I had a bit of a cold. I had the flu a couple of weeks ago, and I'm just recovering. So if I sound a little nasally, that's exactly why. And so just thank you for bearing with me on this show. But I will be back next week, and I'm going to talk a bit more about using search engine optimization to leverage your podcast. I did discuss a little bit about that on this episode, but we're going to go into more detail next time I come to you guys with episode 13. So I'm looking forward to that. And that's all I have for you now. Thank you so much for listening. Come on over to impactpodcastcoach.com if you are interested in finding out more about the services and products that I offer. I also offer one-on-one podcast coaching. I would love to have you apply to my coaching program as well. I do have a higher tier program. That's my VIP program for those of you who may be interested in launching your podcast. If you're interested in one-on-one coaching with me, I also have that available as well. In the next couple of weeks, I will also be adding to my website. So at Impact Podcast Coach, there is a place that you can find resources available, and I will be adding more blog posts, more information, more resources, more downloads for you. I do have something available for you there now. If you want to check that out as well, I would love to have you download that. But it's basically my Soul Podcasting Toolkit, which lists all of the resources and tools that I've been using to help with my podcast startup and growth. I'm also offering an instructional guide and video. It's a workbook and video that guides you step by step through the business tools I've used when initially setting up my online business as a content creator and podcaster. And the video just goes step by step through the benefits of podcasting and all 10 steps to creating a valuable podcast. And so that goes for $49 right now. You'll find that on impactpodcastcoach.com. And I'm super excited to share that with you. It's one of my very first products that I've created for you guys. I am creating more products to add to my store. And I'm just really excited about this journey and glad to have you be a part of it. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful rest of your week and happy podcasting.